Welcome, everyone. We are here to, we're going to start a little early with the hope that we end a little early as well. This is a panel that we're going to have together with these brilliant folks here, and I'll go through introductions. We're going to talk about lesson learned about COVID. What have we learned as a group? And we'll just have a discussion, informal, go in, asking questions, answering things, see what people have. We have 3 questions that we'll go over, and we hope that you find this a useful discussion to have. So I'm going to start introducing the folks that are here. Apologies for my eyes kind of drifting. My screen is big, so I got to shift over here to be able to read here. So Bill Carrozza has joined us. He's been an educator for 35 years. Having worked as a teacher and a principal in a K-8 setting. He has served as an adjunct professor, president of NHCMTC, and is a student. You can find more, if anyone cares, at http://bill.rozza.com/about/. So more information about Bill available there. Christina, I might say your last name wrong. I apologize ahead of time. Christina DiMicheli is the Technology Integration Specialist at Pinkerton Academy in Derry, New Hampshire, with 14 years of experience in education. She's a Google certified trainer, Google innovator, hashtag LAX18, and ISTE certified educator. So Christina is there. Julie Stevens Sage is our student representative. She lives in Nashua. She loves all science, but is especially interested in astrophysics. She produces a YouTube channel, 7 Sage Labs, where she posts videos for her 4th. Supernova Style Science News is where she shares interesting science news with everyone. The Steam Shop, where she reviews science fiction-based kits and shows how to make things. Sci-Facts, short videos, where she shares interesting facts about just about anything. And Sage Lab Notes is Julie's vlog, where she discusses anything in a wide range of topics from science to politics, social issues, and much more. Julie is also an inventor with ideas for products to help people around the world. In 2020, Julie entered into the X Prize Next Gen Math Challenge with her new innovative face mask design. Out of hundreds of submissions from around the world, her design made it to the top 10. Her goal is to increase interest in science, technology, engineering, art, and math through her show and other various outreach activities. Now my scroll bar is missing, so I got to right there. Julie, I don't know if you wave, but there you are. Perfect.
Yes,
my screen.
I wave. Hello.
Awesome. Justine Thane is currently the president of the New Hampshire School Education. She has an MED in Learning and Language Disorders, as well as graduate certificates in Information Literacy and Instructional Design. She serves as the Library Media Director at the Hooksett School District for 15 years, including System Administrator for District Learning Management Systems. She also has 14 years experience as a Special Education Coordinator and Learning Disability Specialist. Finally, she's the recipient of the New Hampshire Library Year Award and School Library Media Association's Elsie Domingo Service Award for 2019. Dolores Fox, on the screen, there she is currently the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for the Multiborough School District. A certified English teacher, she taught middle school and high school English for over 20 years in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. She has presented for NELMS and is a GCLA Fellow. Roshni Lockie, who is right there in my middle screen there, is a partner at the Learning Accelerator, where she works closely with school leaders and districts to capture and share innovative practices. Prior to the Learning Accelerator, she taught middle school math in Rhode Island and was a personalized learning throughout New England. Sue Lengel, who I see is down in my bottom left on my screen, is currently a preschool teacher at Multiborough Central School and has a storied educational career. And I'm the Director of Technology for the Multiborough School District, and I've been doing this. I've been in education since 1998 and served as a library media specialist prior to my current position for 10 years. So, panel, I'm going to open it up. First question. We'll go about 10, 15 minutes depending on the conversation. And then second question. What did we learn we could not do without during COVID? We transitioned into remote. We came back. We left. We went in hybrid. We had a whole bunch of stuff. What is it that we could not do without? Who wants to take it?
I don't mind starting if you want.
Great.
Bill's got it.
Great. It's always easier to start, right? Because then you can kind of relax after that. Um, my jam is really for a long time has been building leadership. And so when we went remote, first of all, it was really hard for a extrovert like me to even handle it. I mean, getting up every morning and walking 10 feet into my office at home was not a lot of fun. But the first thing I realized is that when we were remote, we had to be as collaborative as we ever have been in order just to survive the change. And so my school in normal times and right now is organized in professional learning communities like a lot of our schools are. And without that collaboration remote, it would not have worked. So each of my each of the grade levels in my building met at least a couple times a week as grade levels only, sometimes once a day. And then I met with my leadership, my PLC leaders once a week, which typically is more like once a month. So we actually had to up the collaborative um, nature of what we did during remote anyway, and really also during hybrid, because frankly, it was also confusing, especially at the beginning, that if we didn't talk it out, it would not have been useful. And I look at Justine, and I'm reminded that if it wasn't for our library media specialist, I'm not sure we would have survived. She was, and our whole IT department, but she was invaluable in helping teachers who were not as comfortable with Seesaw and Google Classroom as others are, just survive and really thrive. And the cool thing is that I think those teachers just got better and better. And Michelle Marino, our library specialist, library media specialist, it dealt with these individuals who weren't as comfortable with technology and in such a caring, thoughtful way that they never felt like they were, less important citizens. So just in summary, I could talk all day about this, as any one of us could, but we could not do without collaboration during that period of time. Um, that we especially were remote. That was a really rough time. And I never want to go back there. As much as I love technology, I don't want to go back there ever again.
Awesome.
Um, One thing that I think that we could not do without was like being able for some kids to go back into school with hybrid after a while, like with the masks and everything. Because there are some kids that were really struggling with virtual learning. And so they needed to go back in to be able to get that better help with teachers. So I really liked when we did the hybrid for at Nashville High School North. That's the school that I go to. I really liked when we did hybrid because it not only gave us an ability for kids that need to go into school to go in and get that extra help, but then also for us that were doing well online, or just like we didn't want to go into school and we were just like, we're fine with staying home. I mean, I was sitting on my bed for the entirety of in all my classes, so I was totally fine. But like we could stay home and so we could work more at our own pace and we didn't have to deal with like being inside the classroom and everything if we didn't want to be. So that was actually like really nice, I think, but of course like making sure that the people who are still going to school have masks and have the protection and being social distance and everything like that. Because also now that we don't have any remote option whatsoever, we now have the things like where we're all packed into the classroom or like the hallways, we're all bumping into each other. The fights skyrocketed. But so that's like why like the hybrid option was just like absolutely great. And honestly, I would be happy if we could do hybrid option all the time.
My 2 cents in. I think for us, one of the things that we couldn't live without is organization. And I know that's a really broad term that catches a lot of things, but when I think of that, It was about chunking the information that was being presented to students. And it was about thinking visually for them and being able to present that information in a more visual way. So when you then tie that into technology, that's when you start looking at some of like the daily calendars and things like that that a lot of teachers would put together, whether that was using a Google slide or something in Google Classroom or something like that. But being able to be very visual, very organized, because you had to think ahead and the kids had to be able to really get to what they needed and get there quick. That could not be the roadblock in front of them. They had enough roadblocks, so we really had to clear the field for them. And using some of those tools to be, like I said, very organized, very visual. If you had an icon that was a little pencil, and every time they saw that, they knew that that was attached to homework, then you're ahead of the game. So organization, that's going to be mine.
I would just like to add, I agree with my fellow panelists, especially I can relate to Bill's comments about a team approach. And part of the team, I think that was important for me too, was the family. I mean, the family was a big part of working with children at home. And my children are grown adults, so I can't even imagine what it would have been like to have all these 2 or 3 children trying to get them into their classes. And I just felt a lot of support from families and from colleagues, and most definitely from the IT department.
I can jump in on that. I think one thing that we cannot do without is, having some grace, having compassion, understanding that, the technology is not going to work. We're teaching things that we never taught before. We're all doing different roles that we never had before. A teaching partner that we've, worked with for many years might be ill, might be moved to a different grade level. And I think families as well, they really showed us a lot of grace and allowing us to, flex and try things that didn't really work well, try something else. So I think that's, something that really came out during the whole 18 months, and actually continues even now as we're changing the policies as we speak. So we can't do without that. And I hope that is something that continues.
I'll add into what my fellow panelists have said too. I think one big thing that we cannot do without, as we've learned from the pandemic, is a real focus on well-being for teachers and students. And that doesn't just mean, quick SEL checks during advisory time or wellness checks once a month or every so often. I think the pandemic has really revealed how important well-being is to each and every one of us. Every stakeholder, whether it's a student, a parent, a teacher, library media specialist, anyone who's involved in the school system really needs to focus on that. So we've seen a lot of schools that we've worked with really double click on well-being and make sure that that's a real focus as they move forward. So I think that part is never going to go away, and schools have really brought that into focus. I think the second point that I want to highlight that I know Julie has alluded to is those flexible learning options. We all have now seen what remote work looks like and what hybrid work looks like. And while it's not ideal for everyone, there is a setup in which students can choose their own learning space and their own learning options. So whether that's hybrid, remote, outdoor learning spaces, repurposing different places in our school, whether it's a hallway or a gymnasium or a cafeteria, really thinking through how can we flexibly offer space as well as different paths and paces for our students.
Perfect. From the curriculum perspective?
Oh, I think the panelists pretty much covered all the territory I would have covered. The only thing I could add is we were very fortunate for this pandemic to have the tools that allowed us to stay connected. If you look at the history going back to the Spanish flu, they just closed schools. That was it. They just shut them down and sent the kids home. And we were able because of all of those things that were brought up, the collaboration, the pivoting to be able to keep it going.
Absolutely, and that's what from the technology point of view, that's what I would bring forth, as Dolores has said, and many of you have mentioned, just the fact that there was an infrastructure that we could rely on, and suddenly, very quickly, roll out. Oh, we got to get devices, we got to get stuff, and things just happen. We were told for years in my school district, and Susan can maybe chime in on here. For years, our district was, well, we have a learning management system that we use. Our middle school and high school is using it. It's working great, no problem. But the elementary folks, oh, they're reluctant. We don't really want them on here. It's not the appropriate place for them. We like things going on in the classroom. And suddenly, overnight, we shifted everything, and we got people involved using the learning management system that weren't doing it before. And so we had to quickly provide some training, but some people were really rock stars in getting this and getting the families tied in and be able to use those tools. And so what was not possible, because little ones could never do this, turned out that it was possible. Little ones could do it with some help, but they could use these tools. And so for me, as director of technology, looking back, going, it's amazing that we were able to use stuff we already had, and there was a reluctance on the part of some staff to adopt these tools, and suddenly now everybody's adopting it, and a lot of people were going, this is amazing, how come we've never used this before? Well, I don't know, but 3 months ago you would have been the person telling me, we're not using this, this is terrible, so that was really nice to see that, and see that deployment, and that learning that happened both for students and teachers, that they were suddenly willing to step outside of their comfort zone and really try new tools that I would have never dared doing this, but I'm at home, I got to break it because I'm not going to make it. I'll try it, and that the worst that happens, I pick up the phone, call IT and say, I just did something, can you help me out? Things that people just were not really willing to do prior to this, weren't willing to try it. So that was really wonderful to see that happening and see that step take place. Any other comments on things that we could not do without? Anybody else got anything to add?
I can add something that you're speaking, Etienne, made me think of. Our connections across the state, like RSAU is tiny, and I'm sure there's a lot of tiny SAUs in New Hampshire, and having, connections like my connection with you, we adopted our learning management system, which is the same as yours. Like, I knew that there were people in the state that had experience outside what our small SAU staff could, be experts at. So just knowing that New Hampshire is small enough and close enough, and everyone willing to kind of reach out and take their own time and help, that definitely could not have done without that.
Shout out to the administrators. I'm going to shout out to everybody here, but administrators for really being supportive when this was happening, because they also realized, we're all in this together. We got to make this work. How do we flip this, and how do we do this? Students, many of them bought into it. Some of them were like, oh God, but other folks were like, oh, okay, let's see if we can make this work. We have the social emotional learning and the stress management that we had to do. We flipped out to, for our district, we did Forest Fridays, where go outside and do something, just report back on what you've done, have that aspect of happening. The curriculum, we had to switch that over and come up with, how do we deliver information in now at different modes? Preschool, going, oh my goodness, how do we do preschool remotely? Like, we had to adapt to that. The technology integration piece of how do we make this work and get all, I mean, it was just, to me, it was just like, as folks have mentioned, it was a team approach. It was put together. We were able to make it work. So kudos to all educators and students. We survived this, and I mean, we're still in it, but we demonstrated that this could be done. You could turn an aircraft carrier on a dime. I mean, if you put the effort into it, you can make it work. So, which leads us to our next topic, unless anybody else has last minute things to add. Okay, next topic. What is it that we realized we could do without? What can
I'm
we
going to
do?
jump in.
Go ahead.
I'm going to try first. It's a little thing, but I think that we learned that we could do without a lot of some of the structures that have been built up over time. One of the things that we worked hard on our administrative team was to recognize the working conditions that people were under and said, okay, what can we not do? What can we stop doing? What purpose does it serve? You know, that detritus that builds up over time in systems. I think a lot of that we learned we could do without.
One thing that I think we could do without is Nearpod. I know it's very specific, but I do not like that program. I think it could be a good program. I think the concept of it is really good. But the issue that I had when we tried to use it was a lot of teachers didn't know how to use it, as well as there was aspects of it that was confusing. So the program could be really good if it was like tweaked a little bit, and that like teachers were shown how to use it. Same with other programs. Like I think what we could like do without was just like, I guess this is more like what we should do, but teachers need to be taught how to do it, because like a lot of the teachers in my school, they were literally just thrown into it head first with literally like no help whatsoever of how to do it. Like they had to learn the programs themselves, everything like that. So I feel like definitely could do without like more complex programs and everything. Like we're still also like the teachers are even still getting thrown headfirst into stuff. Like even though we're back, like there's this new app we're supposed to use to like sign people into classes and like use for notifications and things, and literally like no one knows how to use it at all. And it's just like it's very confusing. So that was something that I noticed over the pandemic, was once like things went off track and how people didn't expect it to go, like it all just like was a whole mess. And there really needs to be like tutorials and stuff for teachers and teaching them how to use things, because like they were trying so hard and it was just so hard to deal with for that aspect.
Absolutely.
If I can jump on what Julie says, I think one thing we learned, we kind of knew, but I think it was proven, is although everybody on the screen, I would imagine, I love my tech toys. I mean, I have lots of devices and I have lots of software that I love playing with, but really it doesn't take a lot to do a good job with technology. I think, we discovered that Chromebooks are pretty amazing, given their cost, relative durability, and ease of use, that a decent wireless connection, and some web tools, and both parents and teachers are in pretty good shape. So we probably don't need Nearpod. We don't need fancy video programs. We use things like Screencastify, which was relatively free. And we also found out a lot of programs were free during the pandemic, and some still are during the remote part of the pandemic. I love my productivity apps and all that, but really to do a good job with this, we didn't need a lot. And that was a good sign. And I think, whether it was a PC, a Chromebook, a Mac, we didn't need lots of laptops. $300, $400 tops Chromebooks are really enough. So I think we kind of knew that, but I think that was proven, as has been said. We moved the massive ship on a dime. We just needed Chromebooks with us for the most part.
I can jump in. Something that was a surprise to me. We did not need to have students come to the library in order to get books in their hands. Like we figured out a pretty good system to deliver books to kids, and then our circulation was really strong all last year, which was pretty surprising to me. So kudos, it was really through the technology that we were able to get remote requests, delivered books in paper bags, and was pretty fantastic. Kids still like to read.
I will say that one of the things that we could do without that brought us to a new mindset is a full face-to-face meeting. Meaning that I attend meetings now that if somebody cannot be there in person, it is very acceptable to just have a Chromebook on the side and they're video conferencing in. And that's now acceptable. There's no problem with it. And it just is what it is. And it allows people to participate and be part of things that they may not have been able to do otherwise. I've also had people, contact me for tech questions and things like that from another building on campus. And they'll call me up and they'll just say, look, I just need to show you my screen. Can we just jump on a Google Meet? And we do. They show me their screen. I answer their questions, show them a couple of things, and we're done in less than 10 minutes. And they got the help that they needed. They're on their way. And I really like that new mindset of being able to bring people in through a video connection and allowing them to participate and get what they need, whether it's in a meeting or just for support.
I'd be happy to share a couple things that we learned. So in my current role, I used to be a teacher. In my current role, I work at a nonprofit called the Learning Accelerator. And one of our projects over the past year was to partner with epidemiologists from Harvard School of Public Health. And we launched a project called the Parabola Project. And the whole goal of this project, which some of you may have heard of because we worked a lot in Mass and New Hampshire, was to inform school leaders what are the actual safe and effective practices from the health point of view that'll actually help mitigate risk in school. There's no way to get completely zero risk in schools with COVID, but there are ways to mitigate it. And I think time and time again, we saw a lot of schools spend valuable time, resources, and money measures that didn't actually work or didn't actually help lower the risk at all, but a lot of them are just were called hygiene theatrics. So I'll share three that we saw schools do a lot and are unfortunately still doing. So if you're doing any of this, know from epidemiologists they're not recommending this anymore. But health measures that we could do without now are first temperature checks at the door. Temperature checks have never been effective in terms of, and again, I learned a lot of this too. I'm not a doctor, but I learned small from the doctors. It's simply a lot of the schools use this infrared technology where they hold the thermometer when they come in, and all that does is really take a surface level temperature check, which up to 50% of the time can be wrong. If students are asymptomatic, it could completely miss it. And if they're showing a higher temperature, which could consider a fever, it could just be because they were running around outside and they were warm when they walked in. It doesn't actually mean that there actually could be symptomatic for COVID. So all that really did was form a bottleneck at doors and really lose valuable school time because we had to stagger start time, stagger pickup times. So all it really did was lose a lot of valuable work time and a lot of valuable time in school. Again, it was used by a lot of schools for hygiene theatrics because a lot of parents and staff wanted it. But just know that it, from the doctor point of view, from the medical point of view, it's not helpful at all besides wasting time. One that came up a lot was plexiglass and clear barriers. I think a lot of schools used in the beginning. As we now know, the virus is going to go right above all that. So if you're in a room long enough for 15 more minutes, those clear barriers don't mean anything. And we saw schools spend upwards of $100K on these. So if you're using those, it's really not effective. It's better to spend that money and resource elsewhere. And the third thing we saw a lot of schools do was deep cleaning days. We saw a lot of schools shut down school or have everyone out of the building on, say, Wednesdays or Fridays for deep cleaning. Again, as we now know, that is not effective. The virus doesn't linger in the air that long. All the other measures that were in place with masking and distancing and now vaccinations are much more effective than shutting down and losing valuable school time for these deep cleaning days. So these quick 3 tidbits that we learned from working with doctors, and we try and share with all schools, but definitely 3 things we can do with that are these outdated health measures.
Awesome. Susan, from the perspective of preschool teacher, what could we do without? What did we learn that we could do without?
Well, honestly, I gave this question a lot of thought and I really couldn't come up with anything. I didn't use a lot because I do work with young children, but what I did use, I would not have wanted to pick any of those things to go without. But I would add that I myself could have gone without all that screen time. It was, it was really challenging to be in front of a computer and meeting with individual students and meeting with group times and having circle time, and yeah, and just sitting. I'm so used to being in an active classroom, so that I could have gone without. But all the technology that I used, I really needed it and would not have wanted to go without it.
We had one of the things that we had been told for years in our district was that we could not, under any circumstances, get rid of the bells. They're absolutely needed to regulate the flow of students moving from classroom to classroom. We need the bells. And we have a middle school and a high school in the same building, which means bells don't ring at the same time. So you'll hear a bell like, oh, that's not you. We're in the half of the high school class is the middle school that's moving. And I believe off the top, we either had 21 or 22 different bells from 7:40 in the morning until 2:40 in the afternoon. Crazy talk. And as the person, this is selfish, as the person who had to program all that, and they kept making changes, it was super annoying. So when pandemic came and we came back to school, and the word was, well, we don't want to have a flow of people, everybody all leaving at the same time. So we're going to not have bells, and we're sort of going to do it by zones. We got rid of the bells. We had the bells saying the day starting in the morning. We had the bells saying the day was ending. And kids made it to class on time. Shocker. And now we came back, and now we did 3 months without the bells this year. Right before Thanksgiving, they're like, we have too many subs in the building. They don't understand the schedule. Could we have the bells because the kids are taking advantage? So now the bells are back, but we've cut them in half. We only have 11 bells instead of the 22 that we had. So it's an adjustment in process. I'm hoping we can talk once we're sort of clear and we have more of our population, teachers and students back in the building that we can. But that was one of the things that for me was great. That bell, okay, 1950s, we're done. We don't need that bell system anymore. I think the kids know what time it is and they know where they need to be. So that was wonderful. Anything else anybody want to add to what we could do without? Because we have one more question to look at. All right, the last question is, and now I got to bring my other screen if I can get to it. Our last question is, how does this experience, what we've gone through the last 2 years, how do you see this changing education moving forward? What does it look like? What are we doing that is going to be better? How has this changed education? I'm opening the floor.
I would like to take this one first.
Yeah.
So the thing that where I think this could change education is now that we have methods to be able to do remote learning. I think it should be incorporated in classrooms. I know Christina said that this was something that they were doing for Nashua North. They eliminated it completely. And it's kind of frustrating. And the reason why is so Nashua North has a program where we can go to other schools. We can go to Nashua South. We can go to Alvern High School. We can go to Merrimack High School, and some other places. And we take bus rides there. But the thing is, you can't drive a bus in 5 minutes to get anywhere. So for us to get to, say, South, which is the closest school, it takes 15 minutes for us to get there. And so there's a 5-minute bell before every end bell. And that's when we're supposed to leave to get onto the bus. And then at the end of class, that's when the bus is supposed to leave. But because of that, we get there 15 minutes late. And we have to leave another 5 minutes before class ends to be able to come back to our original school. So we lose 20 minutes of class every day if we go to another school. And for some of us, it's not an option because either our school doesn't have that class, or for me this year, my school does have the classes, but because the schedule system got messed up, I have to go to South for classes that I could take normally at North. And so losing 20 minutes of time, and also if like you're like the only student in the class that transitions, most of the times the teachers will not schedule around you. They will literally do lesson plans and teach brand new concepts while you're gone, and they don't care. You missed it. And that's like really hard because I'm an AP Calculus BC. That is a hard class. And so it's like, I wish that we had like a remote option, because it would be really cool that if we could go into the media center, which is our library, because we have a section of where there's computers. There's also the computer lab, but then there's also like a whole back room section where you could just sit down at a table. It would be really cool if we could just go in there and then just log into like a stream or something from a camera that's only facing the front of a class. Because I know there's the whole legal thing of like, you can't film the students or anything like that because of like they might not have consented to being on camera. But if you just face it towards like the chalkboard or the whiteboard, then it'd be like, okay. And I think that'd be really cool for schools to implement for things like that. Because even if like a student is out of school because they're sick or they got in an accident or they're in the hospital or something, right now, like they come back like 2 weeks later and all the teachers are like, yeah, here's the homework, finish it in 2 days. Like it's really difficult. But if they can actually like stream into the classes and then have with Google Classroom and things actually have the assignments so that they can do it while they're going, like, so that they're not so far behind, that would actually be really nice. Also just like while the pandemic is going on, I would really like hybrid to still be a thing, because for those of us that can keep up and we can keep good grades, I had all A's last year. And like there was a bunch of other students that also had A's that they wanted to stay home because they're like, well, I don't have to deal with everything else like there. I can have lunch at home. Like if we can deal with it, then like keep it at home, because then also that makes it easier on the teachers to a point. Like, yeah, there's difficulty of like the technology aspect, but then like if there are students at home, then like the teachers only have so many students that they even have to take care, like they have to talk to and everything in the classroom and help in the classroom. That's less students for security guards to keep track of and for the admin to keep track of. And because like I said, with coming back to school this year, we had for 1 week almost 20 fights in like 1 week. It was insane when we came back. I mean, someone almost got thrown over a railing. Like it was getting really crazy because like, and they couldn't keep track because they were dealing with like maybe 1/4 the students coming back, and all of a sudden it's now like almost 2,000 kids. Like it's really hard to deal with at times, especially in a school like ours. And so I'd really like to see for schools that can do it, to do like a hybrid thing, or for people to be able to do remote when they're out, or for other programs and things like that. Because I feel like it could actually make it a lot easier for everyone involved.
All right, I'll say something, although that is a tough act to follow, Julie. Let me tell you, the passion that comes from you makes it a tough act to follow. Okay, one of the things that I think about education and moving forward, learning from what we went through, for me, one of the things that I'm seeing and I'm hoping continues, and I'm hoping that we can propagate it further, is teacher confidence in their technology use. And I know that gets lost a little bit here because we know that our teachers are overwhelmed. They're exhausted. This is a hard year. Even though we're back in person, this is a really tough year for them. But I am seeing their confidence levels in their technology use and what they have been able to do exponentially go off the charts. And I really would love to see that be acknowledged more and with them. So that's something that I need to do as well. That's an action item that I'm coming away with. But also to be able to foster that a little bit more. I'll say that the faculty that I work with did amazing things, and they're not unique in that. There's, I think a lot of the schools did, but they're exhausted. And so bringing professional learning to them this year has been very difficult. They just don't have the bandwidth in themselves to do it. And I can't ask it of them. So I did my own little pivot this year, and I've done some sessions instead that are called digital self-care. And instead of saying, here's what I want you to do in the classroom with kids, instead I've pivoted and said, let's support you and get you in a digital frame of mind that you are going to be less anxious, less stressed, and you're going to be more confident when you're in front of those kids. Simple things. I just did one on Google Drive and being organized, and then gave them time to sit there and organize their drive after I showed them some stuff. We're going to do Gmail, we're going to do calendar, things like that where they actually have the time to work on things. And it's a little bit of taking care of them and supporting them. That will go right out to the kids because they'll be better in front of the kids. And then just one other thing I want to touch on real quick, and it comes from Julie. I like to come away with action items. And so when I'm listening to Julie speak from the student perspective, I would love to explore the idea of getting more student voice in the mix. Everything from when, Julie, when you spoke before about teachers from your perspective not knowing how to use some of the tools for the best instructional benefit in your classroom. And that's a voice that's speaking to them, and you learning how to kind of coach them and be a leader in that would be fantastic. And them being able to hear from you and then incorporate some of that would be great. So finding those students that we have in our educational environments and giving them that voice and giving them the tools that they need to express it well, I think is invaluable. So that's again, another one of those action items is bringing up the student voice. And that's one of the things that I'm coming away with tonight.
I'm going to piggyback off of Christina. She had brought up the idea of care. And I think that that is really important, that we maintain where the person is, whether that's a parent, whether that's a student, whether that's a faculty member, what are their needs, and they're not always academic needs. Taking care of, you know, as an administrator, I took seriously the idea of taking care of the teachers. Teachers take care of the students through this. Like to see that going forward. Less is more. Obviously, even though our district was fortunate enough to be in person or remote, there was not as much time in the day. Things had to be let go. If we survived without it, do we need to bring it back? Let's keep the pace reasonable, steady, that life balance that sometimes, you know, we find great ideas, we put them on the plate, but we're not really good at taking things off the plate. Instead of got a buffet that we have a plate that's piled high, that's just not healthy. I'm hoping that we've learned how to fill a plate without things falling off of it. That's my 2 cents on what I hope we keep going forward.
Can jump on a lot of things that I hope we keep moving forward, but one that it kind of goes along with several of you were saying, we are able to get our students outside the building multiple times a day. So mass break, like that would have been unheard of 2-3 years ago. Have middle school students, I'm mostly in the middle school, you know, outside around the building or going up to our outdoor classroom that's almost never used otherwise. It makes a big difference to be outside. We have kids scheduled, like we don't have bells 8-10, by the way. We haven't had bells in our middle school ever, I know. But the fact that they're able to get up out of a chair and walk out, breathe fresh air in the winter even, they actually wear coats. It's like a revelation that, you know, we can continue to, you know, get the kids outside more. It's not just a gets to go to recess and then you get to middle school and you're stuck in a chair and at a desk all day long, other than the 20 minutes you eat lunch. So that's one thing that I hope continues. And then the other is something that Christina, earlier, I do a lot of troubleshooting with teachers on, and the ability to hop on. We use Zoom for our video conferencing. Hop on a Zoom call with them so that they can share their screen, and I can just tell them, click here, there, and I'm not doing it for them. They learn more deeply. You know, they remember how to do it, and it's just in time. You have time at a staff meeting or time to do a professional development day, you know, in what they're going to need in November. But when they know, oh, I want to do it tomorrow, and they know they can Zoom with me or another staff member to, you know, walk through the steps and get it all set up, I think that's like, I lose the ability, you know, have a video, so hopefully it's Zoom because we're here, but some video conference tool that we can use to do that sort of just in time little piece of support.
I could focus on the parent perspective a little bit. One thing I heard, especially with my little guys, kindergarten, first grade, some parents were surprised and at times disheartened that their kids were farther behind at the beginning of remote than they thought. The only reason why they knew was because they were teaching their kids for the very first time. I'm not sure a lot of them really were behind, but I think they just expected them to be farther ahead in reading and math. So I'm hoping and I'm thinking that parents are going to just be more aware of the curriculum and the expectations at different grade levels. Although at the young grade levels, they're almost half a year to a year behind at the moment, which is okay. Things will catch up. So that's one thing. And also, and while I'm not a huge fan of video conferencing for many things, certainly not as a replacement for in person, like our parent conferences this year were totally over Zoom or Google Meet. And, you know, for parents, that was really convenient. And our attendance percentage was real crazy high, as it usually is, but it was even higher than normal. Same thing with some special ed meetings. I wouldn't want all, for instance, the very first meeting or a referral meeting. I'd rather be in person. But if it's a yearly IEP meeting where not much has changed and there may just be a few questions, it's so convenient. So those are a couple things from the parent perspective that I think are really helpful. Whether we like it or not, I think the toothpaste is out of the tube. I think parents are going to want video conferencing as the norm.
I'll piggyback there real quick and just say, yeah, absolutely. We found out that parent-teacher conferences, almost every parent was now involved because they didn't have to take time off work to drive to the school on it during the school day, then drive back, go home, or go back to work. Like in my case, that would be a 3-hour trip to do just to go meet with my son's teacher for 15 minutes. Like that's not a good use of my time. Being able to say, oh, meeting is starting now, click, join, great, have it 15 minutes, done, it's done. I can do that on a break. So I think that was really convenient for parents to be able to have that connection with school that they didn't have before. Roshni, you got something for us? What do you think we should keep? What does this look like in the future?
Sure. So I think that this experience will change education moving forward, as I think it's been thrown around a lot, but I think educators and parents and caregivers truly understand what personalized learning looks like now, how we can actually achieve this with our students. I think the pandemic forced us to now focus on each student and figure out what do they need, what is their learning style, what is their learning ability, whether it's remote, whether it's in person, whether it's lecture-based, whether it's watch a pre-recorded lecture and be able to rewind and watch at your own pace, whether students learn better, as Julie said, at home, on their bed, or they learn better with a peer at a library, or they learn better watching a pre-recorded lesson. I think the actual attainment of personalized learning is now much closer than ever before as we look at different flexible models. I think that's the part that I think people have truly realized, that learning really can happen anywhere. It doesn't have to be between the hours of 8 and 3. It really can happen anytime, anywhere, at your own pace. I think that's the part that we've learned. And I think also the shifting of the onus to students to take ownership over their own learning, I think, has become really apparent. We had a students signing up for office hours with teachers or being able to submit work by themselves. I think that ownership that students have taken is pretty incredible. So I think that part is a real shift as well. And just to piggyback off a couple other people, and I'll drop the links in the chat as well. Our nonprofit is all about collecting teacher and student data and sharing it back out free for everyone else to see. So I'll just share it back out there in case it's useful for anybody. But adult well-being, a couple you mentioned, is just so important. And our company studied a lot of different adult well-being strategies and ideas from districts across the country. And so I'll share a couple ones I came up with that go beyond just like yoga pizza parties, like actually how do we address teacher well-being that's beyond just the typical stuff. So I'll put those links in there as well. And I'll also drop in, we also did a study where we talked to a lot of different districts across the country and like, what were the coolest things that you saw come out of the pandemic? And how can you implement? So one of the ones that stuck with me are more innovative staff really take advantage of teachers' expertise instead of just time in the classroom. So we saw people really exercising different staff arrangements. So one example, we talked to Nashville, Tennessee, and they actually took every single adult to work in the school system. So that included like cafeteria workers, bus drivers, everybody who worked there. And they launched a program called the Navigator Program, where every single adult who would reach out to every single student or family each week to check in on how they're doing, what they needed, whether they needed wraparound services, whether they needed meals, if they needed to connect to a resource officer, whatever they needed, they checked in with that. So I think really rethinking how teacher time can be used in a much better way. Are the ones who are really good at virtual, can they only do virtual? The ones who are really good in person, can they only do in person? The ones that want to span a couple different grade levels, can they do that? So really thinking about what really capitalizes on teacher expertise and using that to the district's best benefits. I think that's a really important part. So I'll drop both the links in the chat in case you guys are interested in learning more. It's been pretty helpful for, I think, teachers and leaders to see what other districts in the country are doing. So I'll drop those in the chat.
Perfect. Susan, you got some words for us?
I really don't. I feel like at the preschool level, we actually went backwards because so much of preschool is learning to be social and learning to interact with your peers. So that was very challenging, but I will concur with my fellow panelists that the Zooming and video conferencing, I would like to see continue. We had a great rate with parent-teacher conferences this year, and I like that we gave them a choice. They could come in face-to-face or they could do virtual. And I would like to see that continue because it does create better participation.
Awesome. For me in the technology world, it really was just the support that I got from everybody. I mean, suddenly we became the indispensable people, and without, and there's a whole bunch of demands. But then people realize quickly, whoa, okay, we can't burn these folks out, because if we do, then we have nobody left. And so teachers and other staff members became more proactive, just like Rashi was saying earlier with, students becoming more empowered. That happened with staff. Hey, I'm having a trouble with my screen. Can you come and take a look? It was like, no, I can't. Solve your own problem, or at least give me a better description of what the problem is, because I'm having a problem with my screen. It's not helpful. I can't do anything for you. Call me back when you have it, when you know what the problem is. And so that really sort of, I hate to use the word empowered the staff to kind of the minor issues that they had before, where we didn't have that. One of the things that our district went through, and Dolores helped with creating that, was we finally wrote a flow chart. If you have this problem, here's who's in charge. If you have that problem, here's who's in charge. Because people would contact me or the members of my team, say, hey, we're having an issue with the doors coming in. Can you help fixing that? No, that's somebody else's problem. Let me tell you who can help you. We're having an issue with the alarm. Ooh, that's somebody else's problem. Just because it's electricity doesn't mean that it's tech. Like, there's some other people that are involved in this. And so being able to kind of get a flow chart with the idea of, here's who you need to contact. And now people me today and say, hey, I'm having this issue, and say, well, here's a flow chart. I'm sending you this. Take a look at it and see if you can identify the person, passive aggressive. See if you can identify the person that can help you resolve your issue, because it's not me. But if you'd looked at this document, you would know. Oh, sorry, I realized. Yeah, no problem. So that was very helpful to have sort of that flow, as a team, develop something like that we could all do it. But I couldn't have done it without the folks that work in the tech department. I couldn't have done this without the librarians. I think this really showed how central a role librarians play in the life of a school, and technology integrators like Christina and Justine. You have essential roles in the school. They don't say that the library and the tech folks are the heart of the building for nothing. Without you there, the teachers have issues of being able to run this technology. So it really was helpful to have that. And of course, for the teacher to just hang in there and go and not give up. We had a lot, and I'm sure everyone went through this. We had a lot of retirements in June of 2020. People that were like, so I didn't put in on November 1st, because my goal was to work a couple more years, but I don't want to come back. And many districts, ours included, were like, absolutely. You want to retire? We're going to make that happen, even though contractually you did not follow your obligations. We understand the pandemic. We're going to do that. And we turned over 40% of our staff in 2 years. I mean, it's just, a lot of training, a lot of things, like Julie said earlier, trying to get teachers back to speed. But that was helpful to be able to have flexibility and give people the agency to be able to say, I can't do this anymore. I need to stop. And people understanding, we understand that. We appreciate you being honest and saying, yes, I can do it, instead of trying to come back and then everything in the classroom and things don't work out. So that was helpful. I think there's a lot of things that we have here that are going to stick with us. I thought, silly me, I thought when we finished in June of 2021, I thought the vaccine's here, they're going to get kids in, we're going to get those kids shot, and everybody's shot. Everybody's going to be excited. We're going to be back September 2021. The masks are going to be off. It's going to be back to normal. Let's roll out what we used to do. I don't know. September 2022 is not looking promising. I don't think we're going back to what normal was, because this is normal.
Yeah, especially because we got a new variant.
Omicron.
It's like 300% more transmissible than the original. It's very scary. Yeah, I've been keeping watch of like the virus and everything since March 2020, of trying to like keep watching everything. It's the school situation with the virus has been in high school. It's very weird. It's very weird. I think the biggest issue that we've really had with the virus is teachers being out. There's times where we have over like 20 to 30 teachers out in a day. And we have like 5 subs total across the entire school. So it's really difficult, and like that's one thing too, of like kind of looping it back into what I was saying of like with the having the option of like doing remote stuff. Like it'd be also kind of nice to have an option, like if a teacher is out on COVID and they're willing to kind of do stuff with the classes, to do like an online class, because a lot of us get stuck at North. So I'm referencing North. A lot of us get stuck into the auditorium, and there will be like 10 classes in the auditorium because we literally have nothing to do and we don't have enough subs. So we don't learn anything for 2 weeks because we're just stuck in the auditorium. And even if we do have a sub, sometimes like we still don't learn anything because there's not really a very good lesson plan. So if we had more of like the virtual aspect, we would still be able to have classes. And one thing that I forgot to mention when I was first talking about this was I actually mentioned this to my school, like of like, hey, this would be really cool to have this at least as an option, or at least look at it as an option. And then they like said a whole thing like it's against the school board or whatever. So we contacted the school board of like, hey, is this something like a school could do? And it does turn out that yes, schools can do a whole thing of either like if a kid is out or switching to the schools or something like that, like it can be done. The thing with the whole announcement declaration, I'm talking about the thing where they put out like, okay, now that we're going back to school, like you have to offer stuff. They just said like you have to offer 5 days of in-person learning to anyone who wants it, but that doesn't mean that every single student has to have 5 days of in-person learning. So yeah, so it's like schools, teachers, if you want to do it, like offer it to the school, tell them that they can do it, and if they want, reach out to the school board, like, because especially if things start getting bad again, which it might if it does get over here in the United States. It's currently not in the United States, but there are 2 cases in Canada, and the virus is really scary because like in the Hong Kong, there's 2 cases, but the thing of what's scary with it was, so Hong Kong does quarantine things of anyone who travels in a hotel, and one person had it in the hotel, and then the other person across the hall got it from that person. That's really never happened before. So this is like a really, really transmissible virus. So it could go really badly if it gets here. So schools and teachers need to be prepared for us to possibly do hybrid or virtual again, because there is a chance that would happen, because also the vaccine is not working as well for this one. Luckily this one can be tested actually better in a way of like being able to tell if it's the variant or not. I'm not going to get into that science. I'm not going to give everyone a science medical lesson today. But yeah, so it's like if it does get here, there is a chance of us actually going virtual or hybrid again. And so we do need to prepare for that just in case. I think that's everything I wanted to say.
No, and that's a good point. I'd be curious to hear Bill's. Our district, we've been in person the whole year so far, the school year. But if we shut down, it will be because we literally run out of staff. We got a message earlier today. Another staff is out in quarantine. At some point in time, we have staff out the wazoo, gone. We don't have any substitutes. We literally can't keep the building open, and not because the kids are out, but because our staffs are out. I don't know how Bill feels about that or what his perspective is.
Yeah, we have not really had a staff problem. We've had kids sick. I think the vaccines so far, short of the Omicron variant, which we really don't know a whole lot about yet, but it really is targeting our kids, which it really doesn't affect us in terms of running the school per se. Right now, the State Department of Ed has no interest in allowing remote learning, so on a full-time basis. But I think they may be forced to look at that, obviously, if we just can't open a building up safely. So I hope we don't go there.
Me too.
We could, but I think we're ready if we do. That's the, that's the nice thing, if there is a nice thing with all of this.
Awesome. Okay, we are coming close to our end time here. So does anyone have any closing remarks? Anything they want to add, contribute to the discussion? Anything we didn't talk about that we should have? Yes.
I think one thing too, that with the pandemic and everything, like mental health is really important for everyone, like teachers and students and everything like that. And that's one thing that I'm lucky with North. North is really good on that. They actually have a program where they'll pull in like professional therapists for students, and it's free. And so they do that for students, and they might do that for teachers too. And it's just like, that's a really nice thing. And then like the counselors can be pretty cool. Like I have a really good counselor. But yeah, so it's like definitely need to check up on kids just to make sure, like if grades are slipping, or even if not grades are slipping. I mean, a kid can have good grades and still have horrible mental health. So it's just like, but yeah, we need to take care of the kids. We need to take care of the kids and make sure that they're doing okay, because there's a lot of hard stuff with the pandemic. Because I mean, like with like situations where someone's not having a good home life. I mean, for the past year, they just might have spent like a whole year only by people that like not good or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, so it's like basically what I'm just trying to say is like, take care of the kids, make sure they're doing okay, give them breaks, don't overload them, because there is a lot of stuff going on for like everybody right now.
Awesome. Anyone else? Closing remarks? Dolores.
I know Bill mentioned that the young ones are a little bit behind academically than where they were, but we'll catch up and it'll be okay. You know, we're where we need to be. Nobody's really behind. We made those measures. We can adapt to them. And I think the districts that have come out of this well have shown a great deal of flexibility, and we need to keep that moving forward.
Awesome.
I just want to give a quick the organizing committee for including Julie, a student perspective in this whole conversation. All too often, student voices are left out. We just hear from teachers and administrators. And Julie, I mean, I can't tell how many panels I'm on where people are like, oh my God, Nearpod is the best thing ever. And I'm so glad to hear that students don't like that. So thank you for providing your perspective. It's greatly appreciated. And I think we need to have at least one student voice in every discussion. So thank you again.
Like I said, Nearpod could be good if they just worked on it a bit more. The concept is there. It's just so many problems with it.
We had, I did not mention this earlier, but one of the things that we did in our district, Julie, was as we went remote, we said, people went like, oh, can we use split grid? Can we use this? No, zero. We are no longer approving any new tools. What we got is what we got. We're not buying anything. We're not approving, but it's free. I don't care. We are not using anything that we don't have because you haven't been trained on it. I haven't been trained on it. I can help you troubleshoot any issues that present themselves, and they will present themselves. I'll be frustrated. You'll be frustrated. Your students will be frustrated. Your parents will be frustrated. We use Google. We use our learning management system. Make these tools. It is what we got. Absolutely. All right. It was a great panel. Thank you so much. Being willing to provide us with your insights into where we've been, what we've learned in this environment, and where we think we're going. I appreciate everybody. Thank you for our audience for taking the time to listen to our ramblings along. And thank you again for Julie for being here, Justine and Bill and Roshni, Christina, Susan, and Dolores. Thank you so much. And we hope to see the rest of you at the conference.